Hello everybody, CritCrab here with another story, this one about a DM that forced his players to draw from the dreaded
Deck of Many Things.
In case you don't know, the Deck of Many Things is a deck of cards that influence or distort reality in some way. When you draw a card, a magical effect happens. Some cards give you riches, other cards permanently nerf your stats. This is a story about a DM forcing the deck upon a group that really doesn't want it. Without further ado, roll post. Our story begins a few years ago when I was in college. I recently made friends with one group of people and we would often play games with each other for hours on end, late into the night. One day, our player jokingly suggested that we play Dungeons & Dragons. We all agreed and were excited to start out the new game. I had a little previous experience with the game, so I helped the group understand the rules and mechanics of 5th edition as best I can. One of our other players also had a little experience with the game, so he volunteered to be our DM. We all agreed and began playing soon after. Just for the sake of context, the important parties in the story are me, a player, the DM, and the DM's girlfriend, also a player. My character was a monk with a hermit background. Hermits receive a special revelation from the DM as part of their background, so I asked the DM if he had anything in particular in mind for my revelation. I'm a fairly relaxed person, so I was down for almost anything. He told me that he had something in mind and to just wait for the first session. All seemed fine and we played our session and had a great time. Towards the end of the session, our party found a small box, which the DM described as having a very strong energy linked to both good and evil. He described that in this box was the Deck of Many Things, and this was what I saw in my vision. For those of you who aren't aware of the Deck of Many Things, it is a legendary, high-level magic item. If a player chooses, he or she may pull cards from the deck, and each card corresponds to a particular magical effect, some good and some detrimental. Usually, if this magic item is used, it is in high-level campaigns, not in a group of new players with level 1 characters. I didn't pay it much mind. My monk was a lawful character, so he saw it as his duty to protect others from its chaotic influence and keep it hidden and safe. All was still well, and we planned to meet for our second session sometime during the next week. I was eating dinner with a few other players in the school cafeteria, and one giggled when I mentioned the deck. I asked her what was funny about it. She said that the DM had planned something special with the deck. My character would have to pull a card from the deck at least one time per session. I could do this, or I could convince someone else in my party to pull from it. I really did not want to pull from it. I don't like RNG-based games that can completely fuck over your campaign. And it went against my character concept as a lawful monk. I confronted the DM about my discomfort, and he told me that it made sense for my character since he was curious. He would want to see its effects in himself or in others. He also said that most of the effects were good, so I shouldn't worry. I didn't want to argue with my friends, start drama, and potentially jeopardize the game that I enjoyed, so I begrudgingly accepted. Over the next few sessions, at least one person would pull from the deck, much to my discomfort. Luckily, I had supportive friends who saw my discomfort and helped me by volunteering to pull from the deck instead of me. Thank you, Cleric and Warlock players. Also, something to note. The DM used a version of the deck that he found online, rather than the one in the Dungeon Master's Guide, so we had some weird effects. My character went permanently blind, became a werebear, and obtained a noble title. Other characters switched sex multiple times, lost levels, gained levels, developed stone skin, and received a wish spell. This was a lot to deal with in a first-time game, and it really disrupted the flow of the game. It also built a distrust between the players and the DM. Eventually, after we expressed our distaste for the deck enough times, the DM came up with a new system for pulling from the deck. We would no longer have to pull from it every session. Instead, we would all have to make a DC 15 wisdom save at random times decided by the DM. If we failed, then we would be drawn to pull from the deck, much like Frodo's temptation by the ring in Lord of the Rings. This method was even less popular, as low-level characters will often have trouble rolling higher than a 15 on a wisdom save. Characters with low wisdom were especially screwed over, as they had a higher probability of having to pull from the deck. Eventually, after more complaining, he developed a final system for the deck. The deck was to be used only as a punishment if we crossed the DM, backtalked him, played on our phones too much, or even talk out of character. This is where his power complex kicked in. The DM was a very argumentative person and always rationalized his perspective, often with flawed logic. So, challenging him on anything was a lost cause. On a future occasion, he would chastise me for looking up a rule in the book when we were unclear on what the actual rule stated. Things came to a head one night. For context, the DM's girlfriend was also playing in our group, and the DM and her would often argue in the middle of our sessions. The party had gotten close to a goblin that we had met and took around with us on a rope. We went into a dungeon and left the goblin outside of the dungeon tied to a tree. The DM did not like that we were goofing off with the goblin, and when we came out of the dungeon a few hours later, the DM described that our goblin friend had died of starvation in the few hours that we were in the dungeon. We all called bullshit on the DM, and he did not care for that one bit. We tried to hold a funeral for the goblin, but the DM threatened the deck on us if we held a funeral for the goblin. Everyone in the party participated in the funeral, and we were all forced to pull from the deck. The DM's girlfriend had enough of his power complex and directly called him out on his bullshit, as we all had tried to do many times before. He was in a particularly bad mood because of this and made her continuously pull from the deck, and she ended up pulling about 8 cards. That was the tipping point for us, and the entire party agreed that either the deck goes or we go. The DM relented, and we finished the campaign without the deck. All of the players enjoyed their experience playing the game, and many of us bonded over our frustrations with the DM. I'm still friends with many of them to this day. The DM and his girlfriend broke up, which decreased the DM's tension. Eventually, we all agreed to stop being friends with the DM after he consistently treated us like shit outside of Dungeons & Dragons. I'm not sure where he is today, but I don't have any hard feelings towards him. We were all new to the game and made a lot of mistakes along the way. I know I've grown a lot since then, and I hope that he has grown too. I think that this should be the point of these stories, to learn how to become better players, DMs, and people as a whole. And post. In all of the stories I've read or seen about the deck, it always seems to be the DM that's super into it. I can understand the players not wanting to risk their characters that they've put a lot of time in and can be pretty emotionally invested in. But one would think that DMs especially would hate the deck, as it is easily one of the quickest ways to derail and destroy an entire campaign. I'm not dissing the deck. If used properly, it can turn an awesome campaign all the way up to 11. But I find it odd that it's always the DMs that latch onto it and abuse it. Another thing I want to point out is that the deck should be reserved only for higher level parties. Bold statement, I know, but it would be all too easy for the deck to obliterate a low-level group. If a low-level group draws Void or Donjon, they're completely screwed. If a higher-level group draws one of those cards, it can be a fun side quest. And the same goes for most of the other cards. Anyways, if you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. Till next time.